The glass doors of Harrington and Cole Private Bank opened slowly. Inside, everything gleamed with quiet luxury. Marble floors reflected the warm chandelier lights. Wealthy clients in tailored suits sat comfortably in leather chairs, sipping espresso while discussing investments worth millions. This bank didn't deal with ordinary customers. This was where money came to grow, and where only certain people were expected to walk through the doors. At exactly 9:07 a.m., a young black man stepped inside. His clothes were simple, a dark jacket, plain shirt, and worn sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive, but his eyes were calm, focused, like someone who knew exactly why he was there. Several people in the lobby glanced at him. One woman raised an eyebrow. A man in a gray suit leaned toward his friend and whispered something. Near the front desk, bank manager Thomas Whitaker noticed him immediately. Whitaker had been managing Harrington and Cole's downtown branch for 12 years. He believed he could identify a real client within seconds. Expensive watch, tailored suit, luxury car keys. This young man had none of those things. Whitaker sighed quietly. Great, he muttered under his breath. The young man walked up to the reception desk. Good morning, he said politely. I'd like to speak with someone about opening an investment account. The receptionist smiled politely.
Sir.
May I ask approximately how much you're planning to invest? The young man replied calmly. About 400 million. The receptionist blinked, then laughed nervously. Sir, we specialize in high-value portfolios. Yes, the man said. That's why I came here. The receptionist glanced at Whitaker. Whitaker had already started walking toward them. His expression carried the familiar look of quiet irritation. Is there a problem? He asked. The receptionist hesitated. This gentleman says he wants to open an investment account. Whitaker looked at the young man slowly. Then his gaze moved to the sneakers, the jacket, back to his face. And how much did you say? Whitaker asked. $400 million? The lobby went silent. Whitaker stared for 2 seconds. Then he laughed. Not a polite laugh. A sharp, mocking one. Sir, he said, lowering his voice slightly. This is a private investment bank. I understand. Whitaker leaned closer. You need a minimum deposit of $10 million just to schedule a consultation? I'm aware. Whitaker crossed his arms. So, where exactly do you plan to get $400 million? A few clients nearby turned their heads, curious. The young man remained calm. It's already available. Whitaker smirked. Let me guess, he said sarcastically. Cryptocurrency fortune. The young man didn't respond. Whitaker sighed loudly. Look, we're very busy this morning. I won't take long. Whitaker shook his head. Sir, people here manage real portfolios. I do too. Whitaker chuckled again. I'm sure you do. He gestured toward the glass doors. There are several retail banks down the street. The young man remained still. I specifically chose this bank. Whitaker's patience began fading. And why would that be? Because Harrington and Cole manages large institutional funds. Whitaker frowned slightly. The answer sounded informed. Still, he wasn't convinced. Do you have an appointment? No. Then I'm afraid we can't help you. I just need 10 minutes. Whitaker's tone hardened. Sir, we can't allow people to walk in and waste our advisor's time. The young man looked around the lobby. Several wealthy clients were watching now. Are you refusing to meet with me? Whitaker smiled coldly. I'm suggesting you find a bank that better fits your situation. A quiet murmur passed through the room. The young man finally sighed. That's unfortunate. Whitaker gestured toward the door again. Yes, well. The young man turned and began walking out. As he reached the doors, he paused. Then he looked back. I really hoped this meeting would go differently. Whitaker shrugged. So did I. The doors closed behind the young man. Whitaker turned back toward the receptionist. Some people watch too many billionaire documentaries. A few customers laughed. But 10 minutes later, Whitaker's office phone rang. He answered casually. Harrington and Cole. The voice on the other end sounded urgent. Thomas, this is Robert Langford from headquarters. Whitaker straightened immediately. Yes, sir. Did a man named Jordan Carter just visit your branch? Whitaker frowned. I'm not sure. You'd remember him. Young black man. Late 20s. Whitaker's stomach dropped slightly. Someone like that was here. Silence. Then Langford spoke again. Please tell me you scheduled a meeting with him. Whitaker hesitated. Not exactly. The silence on the line turned heavy. What do you mean? Whitaker swallowed. I suggested another bank might suit him better. There was a loud exhale on the phone. Oh my God. Whitaker's chest tightened. What's wrong? Langford's voice turned sharp. Jordan Carter is the founder of Nexora Systems. Whitaker froze. The name hit him like a truck. Nexora Systems was one of the fastest growing technology companies in America. Artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, government contracts, estimated company value, $12 billion, Langford continued. He contacted us yesterday. Whitaker's hands started shaking. He's moving $400 million into a long-term investment fund, Whitaker whispered. Oh no, Langford wasn't finished. And he specifically requested to meet the branch manager personally. Whitaker's mind raced. The calm young man, the confidence, the patience. Langford's voice dropped. Please tell me he's still there. Whitaker ran into the lobby, but the doors were already closed. The street outside was empty. The opportunity of a lifetime had just walked away. 30 minutes later, the same glass doors opened again. Jordan Carter stepped back inside, but this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him walked two executives from Harrington and Cole headquarters. Whitaker's face went pale. Jordan approached the desk calmly. Mr. Whitaker, he said, you seemed very certain earlier that I didn't belong here. The lobby was silent. Whitaker stammered. I didn't realize. Jordan gently placed a folder on the desk. Inside were financial statements, investment accounts, corporate documents, numbers that made the receptionist's eyes widen. $400 million. Whitaker's voice trembled. I deeply apologize, Mr. Carter. Jordan looked around the room, at the clients who had watched earlier, at the receptionist, then back at Whitaker. You didn't apologize earlier. Whitaker had no answer. Jordan closed the folder. I came here looking for a bank I could trust with my company's future. He paused. But trust works both ways. Whitaker's heart sank. Jordan turned toward the executives. I believe I'll be taking my investment somewhere else. The lobby remained silent as he walked out again. This time, no one laughed. And Whitaker knew one thing for certain. The biggest deal of his entire career had just walked out the door. Because he judged the wrong man. The cabin of Flight 728 had never been so quiet. Passengers who had been arguing just moments earlier were now frozen in their seats. All eyes were on the entrance of the aircraft. Standing there was airline CEO Michael Harrington, slightly out of breath, his tie loosened like he had rushed through the entire terminal. Behind him stood two airport executives and a security supervisor. The flight attendant who had removed the passenger earlier stepped forward nervously. Sir, we're preparing for departure. Harrington didn't respond. His eyes scanned the business class seats. Then he turned sharply toward the gate agent. Where is he? The agent swallowed. Sir? The passenger you mentioned was escorted off the plane about 10 minutes ago. The CEO's face went pale. You what? The entire cabin felt the tension instantly. A businessman sitting near the aisle whispered to the woman next to him. Something's very wrong. Harrington turned toward the crew, his voice suddenly sharp. Who made the decision to remove him? The flight attendant slowly raised her hand. I did, sir. Harrington stared at her. And why exactly would you remove a confirmed business class passenger from my aircraft? The attendant shifted uncomfortably. He refused to move seats and didn't appear to belong in the section. Several passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Harrington's voice lowered. Did he show you his ticket? Yes. And it was valid? Yes. The CEO closed his eyes for a moment. Then he rubbed his forehead slowly. You removed a passenger who had a valid ticket because you believed he didn't belong there. The words hung heavily in the air. The attendant looked down. I was just trying to maintain order on the flight. Harrington sighed. You have no idea what you've done. Now the passengers were openly whispering. What's going on? Who is that guy? Harrington turned to the gate agent again. Where is he now? He's in the terminal lounge, sir. Without another word, Harrington stepped off the plane. The passengers immediately erupted into quiet conversation. A man across the aisle pulled out his phone. I recorded everything earlier, he whispered. This is going to explode online. Meanwhile, in the executive lounge across the terminal, the removed passenger sat quietly near the window. His name was Daniel Brooks. He looked calm, but there was a quiet disappointment in his eyes. The same flight attendant's words replayed in his head. You need to move to economy. You don't belong here. He had heard variations of that sentence before. Unfortunately, Daniel had simply gathered his bag and walked off the plane. He had learned long ago that sometimes the best response was patience. A few minutes later, the lounge doors opened quickly. CEO Michael Harrington walked in. Several travelers looked up in surprise, but Harrington wasn't looking at them. His eyes locked onto Daniel instantly. He walked over quickly. Mr. Brooks. Daniel looked up. Yes. Harrington extended his hand. My name is Michael Harrington. I'm the CEO of Atlantic Crown Airlines. Daniel shook his hand calmly. I know who you are. Harrington took a deep breath. I want to personally apologize for what happened on my aircraft. Daniel studied his expression. You seemed very eager to find me. Harrington nodded. Because the mistake we just made could cost this airline billions. Several nearby travelers looked over in shock. Daniel leaned back slightly. That sounds serious. Harrington sat down across from him. Mr. Brooks, you are the lead aerospace safety engineer for Orion Aviation Technologies, correct? Daniel nodded. Orion Aviation was one of the most powerful aerospace companies in the world. They designed safety systems used in hundreds of commercial aircraft. And right now, Atlantic Crown Airlines was competing for a massive new aircraft contract worth $9 billion. Harrington continued carefully. You were scheduled to inspect our new fleet safety systems this week. Daniel folded his hands. That's correct. And your report determines whether we qualify for the aircraft purchase agreement. Daniel didn't deny it. The CEO exhaled slowly. And my crew just humiliated the man responsible for approving our entire fleet upgrade. A quiet silence filled the lounge. Daniel looked out the window at the aircraft parked on the runway. I didn't ask for special treatment, he said calmly. I only expected the same respect given to every other passenger. Harrington nodded immediately. You're absolutely right. He paused. And we failed. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he looked back at the CEO. You know what disappointed me the most? Harrington leaned forward. What? Daniel spoke quietly. No one on that plane questioned it. The CEO didn't argue. People watched, but they stayed silent. Harrington lowered his head slightly. That will change. Daniel raised an eyebrow. How? Harrington stood up. Because this airline is about to make a very public correction. An hour later, the same passengers who had witnessed the removal earlier were shocked again. The aircraft doors opened once more. But this time, CEO Michael Harrington walked on board first. Behind him walked Daniel Brooks. The entire cabin turned to watch. The same flight attendant stood frozen near the aisle. Harrington addressed the plane directly. Ladies and gentlemen, he said. Earlier today, this airline made a serious mistake. The cabin went silent. He gestured toward Daniel. This man is Mr. Daniel Brooks, one of the most respected aviation safety engineers in the country. Passengers began murmuring. Harrington continued. And he was wrongly removed from this aircraft. The flight attendant looked down in shame. Harrington's voice became firm. Atlantic Crown Airlines does not tolerate discrimination, assumptions, or disrespect toward our passengers. Then he turned toward Daniel, and we will do everything possible to correct this. The cabin slowly began to applaud. Daniel looked around the plane. Some passengers smiled. Others looked embarrassed for what they had witnessed earlier. He finally nodded once. Then he returned to his seat, business class, seat 2A, the same seat he had been told he didn't belong in. As the plane prepared for takeoff again, one passenger leaned toward another and whispered quietly, they kicked the wrong man off that plane, and now, the entire airline knew it.